So welcome everyone. Thanks for attending this afternoon session. My name is David Miller. I'm the coordinator of the media production program here at George Mason University. We're a small group, so we'll just keep it fairly informal. What I'd like to do is probably between each presenter, I will introduce the next presenter. Andrew here asked to go first. Whoever would like to go second, feel free to raise your hand, and I have a nice little introduction for each of you here. Each presenter, if approximately 10 to 12 minutes, I'll keep time and I'll give you a little signal. And then if we can, we'll reserve our questions for the end for everybody. So this is Mr. Andrew Quicke. He's celebrating his 30th year as professor of film. He has been 4 times chair of the Department of Film and Television, where he has guided Regent University Film to over 400 national and international student awards. Books including Every Frame, a Rembrandt, The Art and Practice of Cinematography with Andrew Laszlo, and Celluloid Sermons with Terry Linville. He lectures on British TV comedy, Italian film, redemptive cinema, and contemporary American film. Mr. Quicke has been an active film director for 28 years and producer for BBC Television, Reuters, Viz News, and Clearview International Cable TV. Furthermore, Mr. Quicke received his bachelor's and master's degrees from Oxford. You might be able to tell from his accent. Faculty diplomas from the Directors Guild of America and the Academy of Television Arts and Science. So, Mr. Quicke, the time is yours. By the way, we are recording these presentations, and on this is a microphone. And if you choose to sit, stand, or walk around, our iPad will follow you. So if you just wear this around your neck.
I'll just find your machine, thank you. Yep. Well, friends, I asked to go first because I wasn't sure if it would work, and as luck would have it, it wouldn't. So I'm going to talk about Shakespeare. You'll have to imagine the really glamorous film clips because we're not going to see them. I'm interested in how we convey Shakespeare to children in school and students at colleges and universities, getting over the language barrier. And these days, a lot of students in schools and universities have not seen full-length Shakespeare productions. The language is off-putting, and the stagecraft appears dated or, if not incomprehensible. That's partly due to the fact that most of us expect to see live drama on television or film where the actual way that an actor projects himself is very different on stage and on camera. And there's a whole new trend in naturalistic acting, which started in the 1780s with the method people from New York and has made a great difference. So, is there any hope that that my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, not that I got any, but if I had, will they know anything about Shakespeare in 100 years' time? They may. One last question. How do I go down how do I go to the next slide? Oh, the right arrow key. Just anyone? How do I change my slides? Aha, great. So where did you place it?
It should just be
on the bottom.
Oh, I see what happens. I see what's happening.
You would think I was an expert in technicalities, but I'm not.
The right arrow. Oh, you could use the arrow. Let's see here. Yes.
That'll work?
That
will
work.
Perfect. Yes.
There you go. Just use the arrow.
So there have been a large number of movies, and I'm particularly going to talk about Romeo and Juliet, that teenagers have found very acceptable. Every year, some new studio risks millions on trying to make Shakespeare box office. Nearly always they lose out. My argument is that choosing to put on film and on television, which I've got something else to say about, is very difficult because Shakespeare is enormously verbally prolific. His plays run up to 4 hours, and if you're going to see a Shakespeare play, you're ready for this. But if if you're not used to sitting in one place for 4 hours. The Kenneth Branagh Hamlet actually lasted 4 hours. My wife had to give a paper, and she sat through 3 performances, which I think is an exceptional challenge. Where am I? I'm just pressing the down button now.
Right arrow.
The right arrow. This one? Yes, good. So my solution is radical, that you shouldn't attempt to teach all Shakespeare. Just cherry-pick the great speeches, and just to keep the audience interested, show them some great sequences. The difference is really an intellectual one, and well worth discussing at a university, because Shakespeare didn't have film or television. He would have used it extensively had it been invented, but it wasn't. So he was a brilliant wordsmith, and he drew brilliant pictures. It's poetry as well as drama. It's absorbing narrative, fantastically articulated. But even more interesting is that we actually get into the minds of the characters, because Shakespeare could use, without a shadow of embarrassment, and we can't, the monologue. Hamlet can be sitting saying tomorrow and tomorrow. That's actually Macbeth. Hamlet wonders whether to shuffle off this mortal coil. I have a little test which I give my classes that something like 45% of the words we use and the expressions we use, Shakespeare used too. We're constantly quoting Shakespeare and are probably entirely unaware of it. So I have a little question sheet I handed out, you see, and people are amazed at how much they use in ordinary conversation actually dates from Shakespeare. So if Shakespeare was a wordsmith, modern film directors, and this is a minority of modern film directors, I mean, too many rely on squealing towers and big bangs, if they're good at being picture smiths, they bring alive both the narrative and the thought processes which Shakespeare has expressed in poetry in visualization. We all still love narrative. The challenge is to tell it in new ways. And Shakespeare did it himself, because hardly ever, if ever, did he write an original story. He borrowed other people's stories. The stories of Hamlet were known. Henry V is known. I shall refer to that. He was also a very political guy, and the Tudors were in power. You did not insult the Tudors. Britain was split between the Lancastrians and the Yorkists, and you better praise the right people. So never rely on Shakespeare for history. He wrote it from one very biased viewpoint, and as we look at modern political discourse, that's very relevant. So when did we first, that should be 1888, when did we first have Shakespeare? Very, very early indeed. 1899 is the correct date, ignore the slide. And it was a 4-minute extract from the very worst play he ever wrote, called King John, or perhaps the second worst. The next 27 years of cinema, there were no less than 400 silent Shakespeare movies. Well, silent, great idea. You can visualize the narrative. Poetry, none. And none of them were very good, which was just the way it worked out. Interestingly, all the early Shakespeare talkies, we can call them talkies, when sound was invented in, it was first promulgated in the Jazz Singer in 1927, nobody tried to do Shakespeare, but Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford, both very popular, but actually married, failed at the box office with really a very filmable story, The Taming of the Shrew. You just need to cut out 3/4 of it. These dates have gone crazy here. 1935, Warner's A Midsummer Night's Dream failed at the box office. 36, Romeo and Juliet, with a superb director in George Cukor, the best producer that MGM had in Irving Thalberg, casting his wife Norma Shearer and Leslie Howard. That failed at the box office. Now, there was a reason for that. In Shakespeare, it's quite clear that Juliet is 15 and Romeo is 16. So if you cast people who are 35 and 45, you know they just don't quite do it. But the result was that pre-war Shakespeare completely rejected, pre-war Hollywood completely rejected Shakespeare. It was box office poison. They weren't going to risk it. So coming back to my central thesis, Shakespeare demands a genius film director who can write or rewrite certain passages. He can direct, and above all, he can act. So the first genius who actually did this successfully, in my personal opinion, is Laurence Olivier, a writer, director, and actor. And he had the luck of speaking Shakespeare more like a native. In 1943-44, Britain was depressed. Although the Americans, thank God, had joined the war, we would have lost if we hadn't had them as allies. Very severe rationing, very severe bombing. I lived in London, was one of the many children who were sent to the country. This was a bad time. And Henry V, as it's gone, as Shakespeare sees history, was a wonderful one. He went to Agincourt, he made a great speech, they won. The Allies went to Normandy, they won. And when the United States went to Iraq, it's amazing, but it's true, that the Pentagon issued free copies of Henry V. They lost. That when we would have heard Kenneth Branagh doing a very nice rendering of the speech before Agincourt, saying, you know, if you don't have stomach for the fight, I'll give you a free passage home, which is a great idea. Interestingly enough, whereas Olivier's was fantastically bombastic and imperialistic, Branagh's is much more thoughtful and aware of losing people. Good, can you turn them off? Perfect, much better, yes. Thank you. So, Orson Welles, who was every bit as a genius as Laurence Olivier, did a very interesting Macbeth, which I've cut from the presentation, which originally was an hour. He also did Othello, but Hollywood probably systematically and deliberately ignored one of the great geniuses of modern film direction. So nothing that Orson Welles did, apart from a few film fanatics, is even known or remembered. But in 1962, a young man called Franco Zeffirelli came to London to make Shakespeare popular for moviegoers. That was his avowed intent. He was going to update it. He used on-location settings, lovely, lush music, which I'm not able to show you, energetic camera movements, quick cuts, and a very romantic approach. And who better than his personal friends, Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, who were married twice, but this time they were married, to film The Taming of the Shrew. And I have a lovely quip of Elizabeth Taylor hurtling a three-legged stool at her father and ripping him out. Now, if The Taming of the Shrew was a success, Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet was a sensation. The first first Shakespeare film ever to make 50 million on an investment of 2 million, which is a fantastic success. And it was, as I mentioned earlier, to cast a 15-year-old like Olivier Hussey, a 16-year-old like Leonard Whiting. They weren't great actors. They were too inexperienced. But they did convey, there was that magic between them, and they conveyed passion. And the whole film is Zeffirelli's film. It's youthful, it's energetic, and it's very sexy. He captured the spirit of the 60s as young people were taking to the streets in Selma, Alabama, in Paris, and in Prague. That's a nice clip. I'm sorry to lose that one. On we go. There's something about the pace which is remarkable, and in very much limiting Shakespeare's stage directions off to say another part of the battle or another position. Well, Zeffirelli decided not to cut all round, but in fact to use very limited places. He used the town square, very, very dramatic, which he built. He used the Capitol's estate, which he built. He used the church, that's easy to find, and a very, very powerful burial vault, which I'm not going to be able to show you. There's something about the quick-fire nature of Shakespeare's dialogue, which is caught in this Zeffirelli example. It's a very good one. But something was also happening in Hollywood. So much of post-war Hollywood is to do with wars. They're refighting it. The Germans are still the baddies. Not so often the Japanese. And there's all of the tradition of film noir and crime. And it's about time that there was something more cheerful. Yes, 2 minutes. My goodness, I got to hurry. So Baz Luhrmann was an Australian who came to Hollywood and who said, we can update this. But first Branagh and then Luhrmann decided to take Hollywood genres like Henry V as a war film, Lawrence Arabia as a full-sense epic, loves Much Ado About Nothing. Wonderful comedy between Kenneth Branagh and Emma Thompson. And that's a fabulous show which I can't show you. But I think the most interesting man so far is Baz Luhrmann. And there's a fascinating interview with him when he goes to present to a Hollywood studio his idea of Romeo and Juliet. And he rehearses with his agent. His agent says, don't tell him about the language. So Baz Luhrmann says, but I mean, it's Romeo and Juliet, it's Shakespeare's. What happens if I'm asking? What you say is a very good question. I'll deal that at the end of my presentation. So they didn't even know it was going to be in Shakespearean language until finally it came out. But fortunately, they backed it. He takes Shakespeare deeper into contemporary teen culture than any other Shakespeare film. That's true. Verona is a mix between Miami Beach and Mexico City. The pool hall is called the Globe. The ruined beach resort is Sycamore Grove. And the language used by Luhrmann, heavily cut and constantly, brilliantly filmed in different little cameos, is fun. I can't show you the 20th century clip, but it's great. So what about Shakespeare spin-offs? Well, there is 10 Things I Hate About You, which is a sort of Taming of the Shrew set in school or so. And there's that lovely film, Shakespeare in Love, when we actually see William Shakespeare trying to write Romeo and Juliet, which was a nice touch. But I was going to end, and you have to imagine it, with Cole Porter's Kiss Me Kate from the musical, as he rewrote The Taming of the Shrew. And the last song, which is such fun, you'll have to imagine it is Brush Up Your Shakespeare. We all need to do it. Finished. Right. Oh, yes.
Okay, again, we'll hold our questions to the end for all of our presenters. Who would like to go next? We have either Corie Ann or Kristian. Corie Ann, okay. So as she comes up here, brief bio on Corie Howard is a second-year graduate student at James Madison University. She will be receiving her degree on May 5th, very shortly here. So we should congratulate her for her degree in communication and advocacy. Her interests are in studying how women's health and sexual health are talked about and displayed. So welcome, Corie.
Thank you. So I explored the television show Degrassi. So Degrassi is a show that's been on for a really long time, and it has a lot of mixed reviews. So the show talks a lot about different swept under the carpet topics or taboo topics such as birth control, abortion, cheating in high school, and a slew of other different things. And so the demographic is primarily between 7 and 16-year-olds, and the kids really love the show. Parents, however, not so much. They're a little iffy on it. And so this paper really was used as an exploration of how real are the storylines that Degrassi is pitching, and how are teenagers viewing those and their parents viewing those. So we think, especially as Americans, that obviously our television contributes to our concepts of reality. And so if an individual is exposed to a distorted view of the world, that individual will in turn have a similarly distorted perception. And so I really aim to explore the Degrassi franchise and its impact on teens' view of the world. So to start off, the narrative that we're going to be looking at within the Degrassi television show is from The Next Generation, and so that's the version I grew up watching. So Degrassi came on, I think it was in the 80s or early 90s, and then went off the air for a little while, came back with some of the original cast, and then their kids, and that's when I watched, and now there's even one past that because my generation has all graduated. And there's one particular storyline that I remembered watching, and it was about a character who was raped. And so today we're going to kind of like explore that. Ryan in 2011 said that sexual scripts are culturally defined patterns of action that influence our sexual behavior. And so those scripts are often around topics such as like hooking up, what is seduction, what is rape. And so rape myths perpetuate these scripts. So we have these ideas, right, that one of the largest rape myths is that men cannot be stopped once they have become sexually aroused. And our second one is that rapists are obviously different looking from other men. And so these myths are widely believed, and they perpetuate like incorrect ideas within an individual's mind of like what does it look like to be raped or like to witness that. And so it's not only through rape myths and sexual scripts that change individuals' perceptions of rape, but also a large medium which exists is obviously television. So women are often blamed for their rape. They encounter two different types of victimization, first with the trauma, and then secondly, like, we have a very victim-blaming centered like approach, I guess, for the actions. And so due to the blame coming from the media and their friends and their family, victims often face self-blame, which negatively affects their recovery and makes them less likely to report the incident. And so there's just some of the things that we see in Paige's narrative. So Paige Michalchuk is the individual who I studied her progression through a series of episodes. But I also know that in one of their more recent episodes, they have taken one of the more recent stories of sexual assault and put it on screen so that others can see it. So, like I said, Degrassi, the new generation, often finds itself under scrutiny of parents. However, in other countries outside of the U.S., it's really viewed as like pushing the envelope and being respectful at the same time. So for us, it's like a very, very like taboo show, but it wins multiple awards. It has multiple Emmys and GLAAD awards, Gemini awards, and the show is produced in Canada. And the producer, Linda Schuler, said that the team will always be working hard to entertain and educate, which I think is something that's really awesome. So they spend a lot of time on their edutainment. So that's like the combination of education and entertainment, so that the images that they are producing and they are showing are as realistic as they can possibly make them. And so to really look over this, I looked at it with like rhetorical narrative criticism, and then I also looked at it through like Burkean anecdotes and realism. And so I was trying to see if it was an anecdote as a dramatic form that underlies like current discourse and content, and is it representative of, not a reduction of things that are happening, and does it represent what a rape case can look like in a whole. And Brummett 2011 said that Americans do not believe that pictures lie. We believe that everything we see on television must be real, and that television is a window to the outside world. And so I kind of pondered the question, so does this mean that television shapes our perception of the outside world, or does the outside world create what we see on television? And so if we see a lot of violence on television, does it cause us to be more violent in our everyday, or do we accept violence as part of everyday life and therefore find it on our television more frequently? And I really wanted to apply this to sexual assault and rape. And so the storyline for Paige Michalchuk covers 3 different episodes, and I'm just going to kind of give you the lowdown of like what happens. So Paige is a high schooler. She is on their cheerleading team. And she interacts with a student from another school who's on the sports team, and he invites her to a party. They go to this party, and so Dean asks her to go someplace quiet. That's the male that she met, and he leads her up the stairs. Dean asks if she's okay with what's happening, and she responds no, but Dean continues to kiss her and continues to make her uncomfortable, and she reiterates the fact that like she doesn't want to be here, and Dean pulls out a condom, and Paige struggles to escape. Continually, Paige says things like, no, stop, please, Dean, get off of me, and he responds with, it's okay, it's all good, and then it cuts to a commercial break with her being held down. And so then Monday at school, she reveals to her friend what happened, and then it gets all over the school and everything, and so she becomes, like, bullied a lot. And her friend begins to question her about, like, what happened, and she said, I didn't even want to do it. I said no over and over, and her best friend explains, like, Paige, if you said no, then it's rape. And so I think this is a really awesome moment, obviously, with them talking about, like, defining it in ways that, like, students can understand. And so Hazel, the best friend, tells Paige that what Dean did was illegal, and Paige begins to divulge her self-blame, talking about how she was dressed that evening, how she had come on to him, how she was drinking, and all of these different things. And so she really begins to, like, self-victimize without having other people even really comment on it. So then eventually Paige goes to counseling for this at the school. And we learn a lot of information about, like, what does or does not count as evidence in the courtroom after being raped. And so the counselor explains that the doctor's appointments following a rape does not count as evidence. And so this is something, obviously, that a lot of the audience, I feel like, do not know. And additionally, with how much time passes, the possibility of the victim winning the case diminishes. And so the longer that Paige waited with the lack of bruises, she realizes that she could lose a case if she takes it to trial. And then we don't hear about this storyline anymore for a really long time. Eventually, when it comes back, 2 years has passed, and it's finally time for Paige to go to court. So it's, you know, showing how long it can be if you start that court process and what that looks like. And so while she's on the stand, she gets really bombarded with questions such as, like, did you willingly go upstairs with my client? Did you find him attractive? Did my client hold a gun to your head, a knife to your head, or a grenade? How many men have you had sexual relations with? And this shows how victims are really denied privacy when it comes to the courtroom. And the questions that are included, like, what were you wearing? Did you go to the party by yourself? Were you drinking? Did you know your accused rapist outside of this incident? And sadly, Paige does not win her case, and the judge and her counsel, like, really like, thank her and try to encourage her and applaud her for having courage to come forth, but they did not have enough evidence. And so this is something that's happening a lot. And so the episodes really show and explain, like, what a court case timeline can look like, paperwork, police involvement, what is testifying. And so it was really great because there was a lot of information covered about, like, what is in that process, but other things were missing, such as looking into Paige's emotional stability afterwards, which we only really see here in the counseling. And so we really only see a glance. We didn't get to see any of, like, Paige going to the doctor or anything like that, or talking with her parents about wanting to press charges, which could be really difficult conversations to navigate. So I think that was an area that was lacking. That would have been really great for viewers to learn from. But overall, I definitely found that it was a representative anecdote. Paige's story really qualifies, as she represents hundreds of thousands of victims every year that suffer from rape and sexual assault. And her story is just one of millions. Also, the narrative is a really accurate representation. And so, first of all, most assaults, according to Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, 74% of those and 38% of rapes are done by an acquaintance, so somebody that you know, either like a date rape or something like that. And so I think the story did a good job of like setting them up about like how you know them. They went to a school beside of you. You share some of the same friends and things like that. And then she's also only 14 years old at the time of the rape, almost 15, and 44% of assaults occur under the age of 18, according to RAINN. And sadly, and probably most importantly, just like her rapist, Dean, 97% of rapists will never see the inside of a jail cell. And so I think that this piece did a really great job of explaining like the processes and everything. But if we're showing that a rapist isn't going to go to jail, then people aren't going to speak up about it anyways. And I think that that was something that was really important that was gained from this. And so I think, like, obviously Paige's story is sad and a very common one, and it shows, you know, both the ups and downs of getting support from counselors and being confident enough to go to court, but also then, you know, the downsides and possible outcomes of the fact that you can go through all of that and really extend, you know, that painful period of your life and still not have really anything happen. And so, you know, it's great because Paige is really encouraged to seek justice in a nonviolent way. And she's encouraged to speak up and not be afraid of the consequences. And I think it was a really great message to young teens. And additionally, during those commercial breaks, they had the cast make little PSAs and was like, if you or someone you know, like, here's websites for you, here's different information. I know that whenever they cover really heavy topics, Degrassi always does that with their cast. They pull people out and they're like, here's where you can get information. And so I think it was really great. I think that the story portrays a lot of realism, and it's a sad, accurate representation of hundreds of thousands of individuals who are sexually assaulted each year.
Is David Dewberry here, any chance? Nope, still not here. All right. Our final presenter today is Mr. Kristian Spencer. And Kristian is a graduate of Randolph Macon College and has a delegation here as well. So welcome here. And Mr. Spencer is a graduate with majors in drama, women's studies, and communication studies, along with minors in history and political science. As an undergrad, Kristian was involved in Kappa Sigma, Alpha Phi Omega, which is a co-ed service fraternity, concert choir, chamber singers, the theater program, and the debate team. So he's been very busy while he was at the college there. In the fall, Kristian will be starting the Masters of Arts in Interdisciplinary Studies right here at George Mason University with a concentration in women and gender studies. So welcome, Kristian.
All right. Oh, it's not up yet. It's waiting. Technology. All right. So, as I said, my name is Kristian with a K, Spencer, for Randolph Macon College. So, a little bit about this project before I get into it. At Randolph Macon College, the Women's Studies major is a very interdisciplinary major. And at the end, we get to choose whether or not to do a capstone or we can take an additional women's studies course. And I chose to have an independent research project to kind of ring in all the stuff that I was doing academically. So I could do communication, women's studies, and political science all in this super project of one semester. So that's where this project came out of. I finished it last May and presented it for our research day, which is what we have at Randolph Macon College every spring. And my advisor is here with me today, Dr. Joan Connors. So she's great if you don't know her. get to know her. I always do that. I'm keep going. All right, so to really understand my topic today, I'm going to give you a little background about women in United States politics today. So comparatively to the world, the United States ranks 73rd in the world for women in national parliaments, which is 19.4% in our Congress and 20% in our Senate. And comparatively, the higher countries are Rwanda with a single or lower house of 63.8%, and Belgium, which has the highest upper house of 50%. So the question here is, if the United States wants to be a world superpower, as many people call the United States, why is women in politics at such a low priority? So in the United States, the current representation, there are 104 seats out of 535 in the Congress are occupied by women, which includes 84 out of 435 in the House of Representatives and 20 out of 100 in the Senate. And that is comparatively with 1998, which only had 63 out of 535 seats of Congress. So there has been a rise in the number of women within Congress, but it's nowhere near gender plurality. Some feminists argue and researchers argue that in the United States, if our government truly wants to be representative of the population of the United States, it should be 50-50 split, even like we have in the United States, 50% men, 50% women. So some people say that the cause of this is that we need more people in politics, which is why we haven't had a female president so far, which is because we haven't had a lot of people in Congress and the government being women. So what are the barriers that women face to reach leadership within the United States government? It falls within three categories. It is historical, societal, and individual mindset. And historical barriers includes us not having a female president so far. And it also goes back to there not being any women in the Congress till the 1970s. And it can also be explained with the voters not being used to seeing women in the United States government, so they're more used to not seeing women within that particular role. It can also be explained by societal barriers, such as the glass ceiling, which is a concept that says that race, gender, and other minorities have this invisible barrier from gaining high positions of power within positions of leadership. And it also can be explained through the concept of the separate spheres. Separate spheres is a concept which people think that women's place is in the home or the private sphere, taking care of the children and cleaning up the home, and the men's place is in the public sphere, or the outside and working and bringing home the food or being the breadwinner. It can also be explained by the barrier of the individual mindset, which goes back to gender roles in education. There's a lot of research out there about how women, little boys and little girls are treated differently growing up in their education, how little girls are taught not to speak up, not to act rowdy, but it's also, when boys do it, it's boys will be boys. Like boys are expected to do that. And it also goes back to gender schema theory, which is the individual self-schema in regards to gender over societal beliefs in regards to gender. So beyond the gendered ideas of a female candidate, issue association is also gendered. Voters and people within the United States often regard women as being experts on issues such as social, healthcare, abortion, and reproductive rights, and males being experts on issues such as economy, international relations, military, and finance. And the higher the office gets, the male-associated issues, economy, international relations, military, and finance are considered more valuable, so men are considered more fit for office, even if they have little or no experience in the field for the office that they are going for. Prominent examples of past women that a lot of the research within this field points to are these three examples because there are a lot of stuff out there on these three women. The first is Geraldine Ferrero, which was the first woman on a major party ticket for the executive branch. She ran on the Walter Mondale ticket on the Democratic side in 1984, and some researchers have said that Geraldine Ferrero, being a woman, hurt the Mondale-Ferrero ticket in 1984. It was not till years later, in 2008, when Sarah Palin and Hillary Clinton were in the limelight. Sarah Palin was the first woman on a Republican ticket for the executive branch, and through her running for vice president, there was a questioning of her intelligence and her role as a mother. And there was also the example of Hillary Clinton. She is the former First Lady and Secretary of State, and I don't have any current research because this was done last year before she started running for the 2016 race. So back in 2008, there was coverage on her frigid and cold attitude. They thought she was too hard for a woman and too hard for office. So through these three examples, there was really what came through with these gendered concepts. And the first was double standards theory, which is the conventional wisdom in the public sphere that has long held that women in politics are handicapped by negative descriptive stereotypes that the public attaches to women in politics. So female candidates, when they declare that they are running for office, start at a disadvantage over their male counterparts, which could be due to women being associated with communal traits versus male traits. Communal traits are stuff like honesty, emotion, compassion. So the solution to this would be to act more masculine, right? Well, this is where the true nature of double standards theory comes into play. So if a woman is told to be more masculine, she's punished if she does not act like a lady. But if she's having these communal traits, they're saying that she'll be too emotional for office and she's not fit for office. So it's really this double standard that she's being punished either way that she goes. And also sexist news coverage stereotypes, which I'll go into, that were found within Sarah Palin and Hillary Clinton's 2008 campaign, were the Iron Maiden, which is exhibiting too many masculine traits, which was what Hillary Clinton was associated with, and sex object, which is what Sarah Palin was associated with through her clothing, appearance, and behaving or speaking in a feminine manner. So an update is necessary on women in politics and the research. So there's a lot of research out there on the 2008 campaign, and we need to see how things have changed within the realm of female politicians today and how society views them. And so is gender currently a deciding factor to voters and within the political realm? So a little bit on Joni Ernst. Joni Ernst is a Republican senator from Iowa. If you don't know her, she gave the Republican response to the final State of the Union by Barack Obama. And she fought for an open seat in the 2014 midterm elections when Tom Harkin retired from the Iowa Senate. So she was running for an open seat. So it was a very highly contested race between herself and Democratic nominee Bruce Braley. So the variables I analyzed in the Joni Ernst race were her self-presented image, the things that she puts out there to the voters and to the public. So that includes advertisements and her public appearances, such as debates, and the media presentation, how the news media presented the candidates. And what also came into play to the variables that I analyzed were Cantor's work from 1977 called Women and the Corporation, which most people use in the Women in Politics, were the 4 stereotypes that he found in his work. The first was sex object, exuding sexuality through their appearance or actions, mother, being caring or understanding, pet/child, the female candidate only in existence for being a mascot or being seen as weak and naive, and the Iron Maiden, exuding masculine traits and being reprimanded for it. So the stereotypes I found in the Joni Ernst race were the mother, Iron Maiden, and pet/child. The first was Joni Ernst being the mother stereotype. Joni Ernst being a mother was stated in the beginning of her political advertisements, which you'll see in clips that I'll show of her political advertisements. She was seeking to transform the term mother into a positive attribute by saying she's hardworking and she's very determined. She did not show her children in any of her political advertisements, which is not normal for many political candidates. Mostly they show their families and their children in public appearances and their political advertisements to show the voters that they are down to earth, they have a family, and they're just like normal people, normal everyday people. So the mother stereotype also has punishment attached to it. There's images of scolding or shrewish behavior with the mother stereotype. It's also associated with emotional matters, and they devote most of their time to their children, so how could they have time for political office or any other work for that matter? So I'm just going to show you a clip really quick excuse me, of Joni Ernst's first political advertisement that she released to the public. It was done before she was officially the Republican nominee for the Senate. This is called Swivl, and it received national news coverage, which included being featured on Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart and many other news outlets. So I'll just show you that clip if you haven't seen it.
I grew up castrating hogs on an Iowa farm. So when I get to Washington, I'll know how to cut pork.
Joni Ernst, mother, soldier, conservative.
My parents taught us to live within our means. It's time to force Washington to do the same. To cut wasteful spending, repeal Obamacare, and balance the budget. I'm Joni Ernst, and I approve this message because Washington's full of big spenders. Let's make them squeal.
All right. So this advertisement squeal obviously brought about the punishment that's attached to the mother stereotype. Ernst uses her castration skills to promise punishment to big spenders in Washington. And there's also mentioning the removal of male genitalia. She's referring to the men in Congress. So she's not so subtly implying that she would bring change and a different perspective to Washington by being a female candidate. Joni Ernst also exuded the Iron Maiden stereotype, which is showing masculine traits, but the news outlets did not punish Joni Ernst for doing so. She did so by her appearance. In her first ad, you saw her wearing farmer clothes, and in this next ad that I'll show you, you'll see her wearing her biker gear. And this was the second ad that she released to the public.
She's not your typical candidate. Conservative Joni Ernst, mom, farm girl, and a lieutenant colonel who carries more than just lipstick in her purse. Joni Ernst will take aim at wasteful spending, and once she sets her sights on Obamacare, Joni's gonna unload. Oh, and one more thing. Joni doesn't miss much.
Give me a shot. I'm Joni Ernst, and I approve this message.
Okay. So from that ad, you can see that she's not afraid to exude masculine traits or masculine appeals and appearances. So the third stereotype from Cantor's works that I found in Joni Ernst's campaign was the pet stereotype, which was used by her opponent, Bruce Barely, to smear her. So they were talking about corruption within the Ernst campaign, how she was financed by the Koch brothers. So if you follow Bernie Sanders at all, you'll know who the Koch brothers are. They're the third richest people in America, and they donated a lot of money to the 2014 midterm elections to make sure that the Republicans won those elections. So he said that was someone else pulling the strings of Joni Ernst's campaign. And the new stereotypes that I found were Superwoman, that she was a combat veteran. She was in the military, she was in the Air Force, and she was pro-gun. And not many women come out in the public and support it. And one of the people in the Iowa newspapers said that her shot ad that I show you was the kind of commercial you would see in running for Texas sheriff, not Senate for Iowa. And there was also self-gender deprivation. One of the Iowa newspapers talked about how she was opposing issues that women favor, such as reproductive rights, pay equality, living wage, and more. And she did not want gender to play a factor. Joni Ernst is the first woman in Iowa to be senator. And she said that she knows that she's the best candidate regardless of gender. So Joni Ernst entered the race as a long shot, and she launched herself into political stardom with controversial political ads, and she did not let gender play a factor. So is this a formula for success, or was it other things? And there needs to be more cases looked at over other election cycles if we really need to draw concrete solutions or concrete conclusions on women in politics today. That's my references, and that's it. Thank you.
A lot of diverse topics. I'm sure you guys have questions. I'd like to invite our presenters, if you don't mind just having a seat here. We have about 7 to 10 minutes of questioning, if there are any questions.
Thank you. Yes.
This is for you, Dr. Quicke, and do you teach a class in Shakespeare and film?
Yes, I mean, I teach film appreciation, film theory of film, film aesthetics, which I think is very important, and also production. But that particular class in Shakespeare hasn't yet happened. I started looking at Shakespeare examples, and I was so fascinated by the Baz Luhrmann film, which I went to see when it came out. And I remember thinking, wonderful. After the movie was over, there was a great gaggle of teenage girls all weeping inconsolably. It's working. Shakespeare would be so pleased. I do recommend, sorry, you have a question. I do recommend seeing the Baz Luhrmann, called William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. It's an amazing production. Yes?
This is also for you. A lot of the Shakespearean monologues refer to the environments because the theory couldn't necessarily have huge sweeping set pieces that would indicate where the actors actually were. On the other hand, there are monologues in Shakespeare that are important to the storyline, but would still extend the movie to a fairly long period of time. Some critics have suggested bringing back intermissions as movies have gotten longer. Do you think that that would possibly be another solution if we were to continue having these long monologues into the
I think it would be an excellent idea. For one thing, when we have our film show at Regent, where we look at the student work, we always break in the middle. It's a great time for networking. But also, sometimes we need an emotional break. If it's been very tense, it's nice to have 10 minutes off and then go back into it. It gives the director much more freedom to do what he really wants. And they would certainly put up the sales of popcorn. So I think it's a good idea, but it's not going to happen. And I think what we forget is that the way we see movies now is so changed, largely due to television, that in 1947, if you went to the movies, you'd get the A picture, which is the big one you wanted to see, and the B picture, which you didn't want to see, but Ronald Reagan was on it, so you have to put up with that. And then there was a newsreel, and then there was a documentary, and then there was a cartoon, and you were there for 4 or 5 hours, and you thought it was a really good entertainment. Now we all seem to have to hit the exits after 2 hours, which is good for the owners of the exhibition, the movie house that you went to, because they can turn them over faster. But you know, I think it's self-defeating. I go at odd times to our local 18-screen multiplex, and there might be 3 people in it. So they're not getting that audience at other times. Maybe we should reduce the number of times it's shown. But the other thing is a new disease, and it's streaming 13-part series, and people have these wonderful sort of locked in, and I saw that everything of a House of Cards all in one time. Well, that's an experience, but it's not probably what Shakespeare thought of when he thought of entertainment. However, I'm guilty. I like to screen. The thing about streaming is don't tell anybody else what the answer is, what the end is. Yes.
Oh, sorry, that was a good question.
Yes. Sorry.
Do you see any of those things playing out now in this election? I guess probably some of them. Which ones do you see playing out, like in Hillary versus Bernie?
Themes that I saw from my own research that I didn't get to talk about was the new wave of the Republican that I also saw in Carly Fiorina when she was still in the race. And the new wave of the Republican is a new research that's coming out about how conservative female Republicans are changing the face of the Republican Party. And I think there's a lot of good research out on that because Carly Fiorina wasn't considered that big of a candidate, which is why she dropped out. But during her debate performances, her numbers in the poll climbed because not many people thought that she would perform as well as she did. And the same went for Joni Ernst in her debates. So comparatively, that too. And also Hillary Clinton, obviously how she changed in 2008 to 2016 would also be an interesting thing to look at. So a lot has happened, and I hope to do it in grad school when I'm here. So.
I have a question for Corie.
Yes.
I'm wondering, in the background, perhaps the literature that you gathered in preparation for your analysis of this show, are you finding that television is taking on this trend of dealing more with kind of the heavy-hitting personal issues than maybe previous eras have been? It's just more out there, it's more likely to be addressed, or is an episode like this and a storyline like this still really quite rare even in this day?
I mean, I think definitely you can see that we are coming up on these topics more. However, Degrassi throughout all of its iterations have always been on the front lines of tackling these really difficult topics. I mean, the very first episode of Degrassi, The New Generation, is about one of the students like meeting somebody online and all of the dangers of that. That's the very first episode they show. And then this one happens a couple seasons in, and I know that even, I want to say it was either 1 or 2 seasons ago, but when the case came out about the girl who had been assaulted, I believe that it was in Ohio, and it was filmed, and she didn't remember it until it circulated around the school. They built an entire plot line around that on Degrassi, so they were taking things that are happening in the news that teens may not be paying attention to and bringing it to characters that teens have invested in, you know, that they relate to and that, you know, they identify with. And so I think that it's really great. I definitely think that a lot of shows are coming around to it. I know a lot of the things on ABC Family now, even like The Secret Life of the American Teenager, like they're definitely stepping up and starting to slowly tackle those things. I just think that Degrassi makes it like the very front line in every single one of their episodes. I mean, they've dealt with, you know, school shootings back when Drake was on it, you know. Jimmy was cool, you know, and so like, I mean, drugs, you know, things that are happening at home. I mean, they just tackle everything and put it right out there for teens, which is great, and teens really love it. But like I said, the parents don't respond as well to it sometimes.
You raised this as one of the research questions, and I maybe didn't have time to get to the answer, but it's been probably 40 years since I looked at this literature on the question you raised. What is the net consequence, regardless of context? Does context make a difference now? When you show these sorts of episodes, affect negative, which is what I thought we established back in the 1960s.
Right.
This kind of term is that continuing to be verified, or is...
Yeah, and I think that now they're thinking of it as more like cyclical, like things are, you know, always influencing, you know, one another and how people are acting and the things that are on the television. I don't think, you know, that one, you know, necessarily causes the other, but I think that they both have multiple factors, and it's just constantly swirling.
We have time to squeeze with one more question.
Yeah, you mentioned that parents aren't really crazy about the show.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering why that is, if it's bringing important issues to light that can possibly help their children in a
Yes.
dangerous situation.
Well, from my personal experience, I was watching an episode. I was probably in, I don't know, 6th or 7th grade. My sister and I were watching it together. And it was an episode where the cast was in a sexual education course, and the teens were being taught how to put condoms on bananas. And my mom was like, "Get out of the room, go." But it tackles a lot, and it doesn't use like really aggressive language or anything like that. Like it's, you know, it's not like our rap videos. They're, you know, it's not Nicki Minaj or anything like that. You know, they're not using any of that sort of language. But I mean, they're I think it's because they're tackling things that people are just scared to talk about. They're scared that it'll happen. People are scared that if we talk about suicide, then people are going to commit suicide. But the research is showing that if people are already thinking about something, then talking about it isn't really going to change their mind if the thought's already there. And so, I mean, parents, I think, sometimes maybe too scared to have those conversations about what do you do if there's gun violence in your school. What do you do if you know your friend is, abusing pain medications and things like that? And I think that they're just scary topics. And if you really had time to sit down and discuss all of them, then it would probably take a week. And so I think that the show is just trying to, find a happy medium. And of course, there's, drama and there's humor in it and all these other things. But I mean, I know that some of it my parents think is too mature for their for the audience that watches that particular channel. Like I said, I believe it's 13 to 17.
All right, thank you, panel.
Awesome.
Thank you for coming.
Very, very interesting. It seems to me that the reason why Degrassi needs